I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
Russia, as a state, has never interfered with the internal affairs of the United States, let alone its elections.
Sir, this is the indictment. It shows I have 12 names here. It talks about specific units of the GRU, Russian military intelligence. Is the GRU not part of the Russian state?
A fascinating and surreal summit and news conference, and then a fascinating interview with the Russian president. Let's bring in our panel. Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist, Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio, and Chris Steyerwalt is politics editor here at Fox News. Molly, your take on all of it.
Well, it's been a crazy day, and a lot of people here in D.C. are absolutely freaking out about President Trump declining to have a strong condemnation of Russia. They're saying this is treasonous, that he's a traitor, strong condemnation of Russia for their election meddling. They're saying he's a traitor, he needs to be removed from office. I think a lot of the people who support him say, I don't see what the big deal is, there's not much you can do in this kind of environment. But it seems like Donald Trump, of all people, should have been able to split this baby, and that you can point out that our intelligence agencies have come to this conclusion, and it's not just Bob Mueller. In fact, that Bob Mueller indictment reads a lot like the report that came out of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, led by Devin Nunes. It's also Dan Coates. These are people, this is a very broad bipartisan issue, so you can stand behind that and also make the point that he's declining to admit guilt.
You know, you're referencing John Brennan, former CIA director, who put out that tweet about treasonous, but there are also Trump supporters, like the former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, who tweeted out a little while ago, President Trump must clarify his statements in Helsinki on our intelligence system and Putin. It is the most serious mistake of his presidency and must be corrected immediately. That from Newt Gingrich.
Yeah, and you had statements from Paul Ryan. You had statements from Mitch McConnell. You had people like Bob Corker, of course, people who are not running again, who are free to be, and Jeff Flake, who are free to be more critical. Sure. But I haven't seen anyone rushing to the president's defense and saying what he did in Helsinki was good and held up the interests of the United States. I want to say something about that interview, which was amazing.
Yes.
Vladimir Putin, even though, of course, he denies interfering in our elections, went on in granular detail to describe why releasing the emails hacked from the DNC was something like a public service.
But they were real.
They were
so
real. And
it's okay.
Certainly didn't the public have a right to know how the Democrats were manipulating their primary process in favor of Bernie Sanders?
But we didn't do it.
But we didn't do it. That, I thought, was pretty amazing. I think that he doesn't care if people think he did it. As a matter of fact, I thought he was boasting a little bit.
He did have that look about him, the smirk kind of.
And he probably quite intentionally dovetails his critique there with the president's argument and the arguments that the president's supporters make, and they overlap. And I am sure that there's about 25% in the most recent Pew poll, about 25% of Republicans have a favorable view of Vladimir Putin and think he's all right. And for that quarter of the Republican Party, quarter and growing of the Republican Party, they probably agree with him. That say, well, you know what, if you hacked her, at least we found out and Hillary's not president. So I think that's not going nowhere.
So the first time that President Trump will speak out after all of this and the reaction to it will be on Sean Hannity's show tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Here's a little taste of that.
90% of the nuclear power in the world between these two nations. And we've had a phony witch hunt deal drive us apart.
This is the biggest wedge. This was the biggest wedge.
It's the thing that he told me when he went in. He said, what a shame. He felt it was very hard for me to make a deal because of, all of this nonsense.
Talking about Putin and the investigation, the Mueller investigation.
Well, what is so interesting to watch here is that for a year and a half, we have had the media and the intelligence community completely conflate the issue of Russian meddling with this theory of treasonous collusion to steal an election that belonged to Hillary Clinton. That has caused real damage to the Trump administration. It caused damage before he was inaugurated. It completely sidelined his attorney general so that the Department of Justice is completely not run by one of his by his attorney general. And it caused so many problems. And yet now people are trying to pretend like they didn't conflate those two issues, and now they're trying to separate them. It's true that Donald Trump has trouble separating those two issues, but he has trouble because he's been victimized for a year and a half by people who are unable to separate those.
It will be interesting to see what points were put on the board or whether this is the start of just more talks. Because the blow-up is quite something.
Somebody's going to have to quit.